Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Differentiate to Dominate, the Key to Building an Unbeatable Brand. As we continue our theme of remodeling for the month of August, I have the pleasure of introducing today's speaker, Emma Shermer-Tamir, CEO and co-founder of Marketing by Emma. Emma, please take it away.
Hello, my name is Emma Shermer-Tamir. I am the CEO and co-founder of Marketing by Emma, and I am so excited to be here with you today during this webinar talking about how to build an unbeatable brand. I realize that sounds like a tall order. What does an unbeatable brand even mean, especially in this world where AI and competition and costs and all of these different things are just adding complexity and noise? How do we actually stand out? How do we make customers feel like they must work with us, they must buy our services or our products over any of the other options out there? And in this session today, I'm going to be going through my proven framework that you can use to become unbeatable. So I gave you a little bit of a teaser with that introduction, but what is the one thing that could help you attract more of your ideal clients, boost profitability, increase customer lifetime value, confidently show up with your digital marketing, empower team members who are representing your business in all different aspects and roles, improve customer experiences, which can lead to better and more reviews, more referrals? So what can really be that engine that can help improve, strengthen, and grow every single aspect of your business? And that really at the heart of that is your brand. So let's look at this glass, and no, this is not about optimism. This is not about seeing the glass half full or half empty. There are some people that might look at this glass of water and they might see a business opportunity. And I realize that that might sound completely ludicrous to you because it's a glass of water. There is nothing unique here. There is nothing special. There is nothing about the water itself that is unique that would compel customers to want to spend money to buy this glass of water over the water that they can already buy at the store or pour for themselves out of their own tap. But there are some people that are going to look at this glass and they are going to say, you know what? I think we can do something here. I believe that with the right branding strategy, I can create a multi-billion-dollar business. But what do you do? How can you compete in a flooded market? Because that's exactly what water is. This isn't just a metaphor. And while we are using this example of water, which is obviously such a basic necessity that we all engage with on a daily basis, the goal of using water as an example is to demonstrate how even the very most basic item, even the most bland product, when branded correctly, can yield really incredible results for your business. And the exact same thing can be true for you if you really take these lessons to heart and you use the tools that I'm going to be sharing with you today to strengthen your strategy and to think bolder and bigger. But a lot of people, when they are looking at any flooded market, they might feel like, well, it's too competitive, so I'm just not even going to try to compete. There are already people, they are dominating, they are doing a great job. What can I bring to the table? What can I offer that isn't already there? There are others that take the approach of thinking, well, we'll just be the cheapest. We know that we can't necessarily compete on quality or name, but we know that there are always customers who are willing to pay less, even on an unknown brand, and so we're going to take that route. Now, the problem with taking that direction is that somebody can always choose to be cheaper. Being cheap isn't a strong positioning in the market. It's not defensible. There is nothing that you can do to prevent a competitor from choosing to take on a loss in order to drive you and others out of business. So the cheapest route is really going to limit your abilities to grow and to be ambitious and to do the things that you need to do, not only to attract new customers, but to grow a really healthy business that can survive the highs and lows that we all encounter as we are growing our businesses. Some might say, well, you know what? We've been around forever. We have that recognition. People know who we are. They trust us. The people that they look to for advice also trust us. So we're good. We don't have to worry. We are set. That can be a really dangerous mindset to fall into, and the danger with that is that you may not even be aware of it. Whereas if you are a new business trying to enter a new market, then you're scrappy, you're thinking creatively and strategically, but it's so easy when you are already established to feel like you have things under control and nobody's going to threaten you, and that can be a dangerous place to be. Some others might say, you know what, we're just going to get really, really, really aggressive with our advertising and marketing strategy. We know that if we just do more, we spend more money, we show up in more places, that we are going to attract more businesses, and that can be true. But if you haven't done your homework of really building that solid brand, then you're going to be throwing a lot of money away. And then that last piece is, you know what? We'll just talk to more people. We'll recruit more influencers and spokespeople. We'll just show up in more places. So similar to that advertising, but all with this idea of we can just outspend our competitors. So sort of taking the approach from the opposite side with that, with being the cheapest. This is, we will just spend the most money and eventually that's going to pay off. Now, I do want to give you a little bit of context about who I am so that you know where I'm coming from in talking to you about standing out in a competitive marketplace, because since 2016, I have been growing Marketing by Emma alongside my husband and business partner, Erez Tamir, who is in that picture to my left. And we have been helping businesses be competitive in the most highly cutthroat marketplaces around, on Amazon, on Walmart, and in the e-commerce space, helping brands stand out, launch, grow, attract new customers, and thrive even in extreme circumstances, even in highly competitive categories. And so I am distilling that knowledge that I have used and gained in helping over 2,500 brands find success online into creating this branding framework that is so powerful. And I'm really excited for you to learn about it and begin to apply it to your own business. So there are 3 C's for building an unbeatable brand. There is a competitive landscape survey, there is the customer avatar development, and there is the company identity deep dive. So in this framework, we are going to be going through these 3 C aspects that are going to help you think deeper, think more strategically, get really crystal clear about exactly who you are competing against, and who you are going to serve so that you can really create that unbeatable brand that I know you have the power to achieve. So as I mentioned, step 1 is survey the competitive landscape. So competitive landscape is the first C, and this is so important because if you want to build an unbeatable brand, you must recognize that you are not selling to customers in a vacuum. There are many other choices that customers have when they are trying to decide who to work with or who to buy from. And if you want to be able to stand out, then you need to understand how you can contrast your offer to all of the other offers that are out there on the market. So we need to be very clear about figuring out what sets you apart from your competition. And the first piece of figuring that out is who is your competition in the first place. So in this case, going back to the example of selling water, we can look at a variety of different water bottles from many of the largest water bottle brands on the market, and we find ourselves immediately looking at a bit of a conundrum, because if we look at these water bottles, they all look more or less the same. They're using mostly blues and very life-sustaining natural kinds of imagery. We see flowers and mountains, and it is obvious why they would choose blue, because that's what we associate with the color of water. There is that one exception with the green Perrier bottle, but by and large, these are all very much taking the same approach and really failing to stand out, failing to beckon to customers to communicate what they might be offering that is different than the competition. Of course, we see slightly different shapes of bottles and sizes and everything, but more or less, they are all competing in the same very narrow space. And of course, we are just looking at the aesthetics at the moment, but if we were to go deeper into any of their marketing, we would see much of the same thing. We would see very similar approaches to hydration and sustaining your quality of life, and it is all very nice, but it doesn't have a clear perspective. It doesn't have a clear point of view. It doesn't have really anything that speaks to an individual customer and says, I see you. They're just hoping that that's going to be the brand that you've always chosen to buy, or that's what's available when you're at the airport. And so there's really not a lot here that is developing that deep brand, not just identity, but that loyalty component, because that's the other part of building a really strong brand. It's not just about giving customers a reason why they should choose you over all of the other alternatives. A strong brand also keeps customers coming back so that they want to buy from you over and over and over again. And it also is one of the things that really leads to a strong referral source, because when you have that strong brand, people feel deeply connected to it and they want to recommend you to other people. So there are so many ways that a strong brand is essential, not only to that initial sale, but really in helping to continue to strengthen and fuel your business. So if you are familiar or not familiar, Liquid Death is a relative newcomer to the world of water bottles. However, they are packaging their still water in cans, which is pretty unique. Obviously, we are all familiar with sparkling water in a can, but it's very rare to see still non-bubbly water in a can. But they have taken a radically different approach. Let's just go back for a second. So we see here, they are these natural, gentle images. And then Liquid Death, we have a melting skull. If you didn't know the brand, you might even think that it is an alcoholic beverage, but in fact, it is just water. And you see that it's not just the imagery and this reminiscent beer can look. Even with their messaging, don't be scared. It's just water. Hashtag murder your thirst. Hashtag death to plastic. So rather than life sustaining, they're talking about murder and death. Obviously in a playful way, obviously with a sense of humor and a little wink and a nudge, but still creating very strong contrast between everyone else in the market and who they are. And as a result, this is going to resonate with a very different set of customers that may not be served by the other options that are out there on the market. So you need to think outside of the bottle. That means reading reviews, social media research, really looking at all of the places that your competitors are showing up online and getting to know them very deeply. Wondering, are there customers who are not currently being served by these current competitors? Are there perhaps benefits or concerns or interests that are not being directly addressed by my competitors? Are there any unique positioning opportunities? Are there gaps that I can fill that may be waiting there and ready? And rather than just trying to go head to head doing the exact same thing as what my competitors are doing, if I take a different approach, then I can open up in some ways almost a whole new area for myself, a whole new subcategory within my category, and then that changes the level of competition completely and really makes it so much easier for me to gain traction in so many other ways. And one thing that you can do to actually help turbocharge all of this, because obviously this is a lot of time, energy, and research to go through all of these different parts of how your competitors are showing up online. And so you can actually use AI tools like ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude or your favorite AI tools to do a lot of this analysis and research for you. For example, you could put your competitor's website into your favorite chatbot and ask that AI to tell you who does it perceive their target customers to be, what are some of the missing benefits that they are not speaking to, how is this brand showing up, how would it describe this company's brand identity, where are their weak spots, where are they maybe having those blind spots that they are just totally ignoring. And you can do this not only with their websites but with their reviews, with their social media accounts, and this can be a really helpful way of being able to speed up this process, as well as really being able to get a distillation of information, recognition of patterns, and connecting dots in a way that can sometimes be hard to do as a human when we are just going through things in a more linear fashion. So that was step one, surveying the competition. Now, step two is developing out your customer avatar. You may have also heard of this as your ideal customer profile. Those terms are interchangeable, but either way, what we're speaking to with this is that full descriptive profile of who your target customer is. In other words, if I were to read this dossier, let's call it, of your customer avatar, then I would instantly be able to imagine a very clear image of exactly who this person is, not only what they look like, but where they live, what they're thinking about, what their deepest, darkest fears are, what their goals are. All of these details are so incredibly important because we need to not only understand who we're competing against, but we need to have a really strong idea about who we are speaking to and selling to. And the more clarity that we can have around that, the more targeted we can be with our language and our imagery and our marketing approach, so that we don't waste effort and energy, but so that we are also able to really compel those customers in a way that we wouldn't be able to if we were speaking to a broader, more general audience. So who is your target customer? That is the question that we are trying to answer with the second C in step two. Now, Liquid Death is very clear about who their target customer is. You can see here, these are just a few of the images from their Instagram account. Now, I took this picture a little while ago, so I imagine that they have even more followers, even more images tagged, but you can see here that these are all user-generated content of real customers who love this product and want to tag the brand in their pictures. And you can see here, just from this grid of 6 images on Instagram, that we have a very clear idea of who these customers are. We see somebody with a horror mask. We see somebody that it almost looks like maybe they're in the back room. I'm blanking on what the proper name for it is, but what the room that you wait in to go on stage, so maybe he's a member of a band waiting to perform, drinking his liquid death. We have somebody at a cemetery with kind of like a rocker stance, somebody at the gym lifting really heavy weights. So we're starting to get an idea of the kind of people that this company is speaking to, that this brand is resonating with. They're people that are a little bit out of the box in how they look at the world and how they look at themselves. And they like to be perhaps a bit contrarian and unique. They like pushing boundaries. They like being different. And all of that is going to then fuel how the brand is going to be showing up and communicating and speaking to them. Whereas if they were trying to speak to customers that are perhaps a little bit more conservative and straight-laced, and these are just some very general terms still. This is not nearly as detailed as you really want to get with a strong customer avatar. But even still, even some of these refining details begin to paint a picture that is not only giving you the ability to speak more clearly and directly to your target customers, but you see here how this also becomes another tool that you have to create that contrast with your competitors, because none of the competitors are speaking like this to people who care about things in this way. This is like the anti water in some ways. So it's for people that still want to drink raw water, but who like to push barriers and go against the grain. So you really need to obsess over your customers. I'm sure you understand this on a basic level, maybe even a deeper level, but even if you understand this on an intellectual plane, it can become so difficult to really truly lean into and implement when it comes to your marketing efforts and when it comes to building out that distinctive brand voice. And that's because when you are thinking about who your target customer is, you also have to have that clarity about who your target customer isn't. And that can feel really scary and really intimidating, and it can make it difficult to really lean in and speak directly to a customer base because you feel like you are limiting your opportunities. You feel like you are maybe going to turn away business by doing that. But really, it's actually that the growth that you are after comes when you are able to cultivate that really excited, enthusiastic, really fan base that transcends beyond just a customer. It's not just a transaction. These are people that are excited about what you're doing, that even after they've bought from you, they want to follow along, they want to cheer you on, they're rooting for your long-term success, and you're not going to be able to really cultivate those kinds of relationships if you are playing it safe and if you are speaking to too broad of an audience. So you need to get clear about who your customers are, what they care about, what gets them excited, what keeps them up in the middle of the night. Find that benefit to them of what it is that you are offering and asking yourself, why does it matter to them? Keep asking why, and then also finding those features to support your claims. Now, this is getting a little bit more into the actual implementation of this, but it's really important when you are thinking about how to present what it is that you're offering. So often we can fall into talking about our brand's offer and mission and values and what we do all through the lens of we, our, us, I, and that is not speaking directly to the customer. You may have heard that everybody's favorite word is their own name, and there is a lot of truth to that. And while you may not always be able to speak directly by name and address that person by their first name, you can still make them feel like they are being spoken to by centering them in everything you are doing, by really making it about them. So even though we're talking today about building an unbeatable brand, when you are able to obsess obsess over your customers, that's where the magic can really happen. Now we are to the step number 3, build your brand identity, or for the sake of the 3 C's, your company identity. But I like how brand identity sounds better. So despite the fact that this is the 3rd C, you see that the C is not there. So the question that we are asking in this 3rd step is, if your brand were a person, how would you describe them? So just like what we did in step 2 with our customer avatar, we are now wanting to do this exact same thing with your own brand. And obviously, a customer is a real life person. A brand is not. It's really an idea, a concept, a feeling, an identity of how a business shows up in the world. But that doesn't mean that we cannot personify your brand. And in fact, doing so it really becomes a very powerful tool, not only for yourself, but also for anybody else that works for your business or is contracting with you. And so when you have this brand identity, this brand persona, and you're able to share that with a designer or an editor or a customer service representative, and then they really truly understand who your brand is and how you're wanting to show up in the world, then it makes their job so much easier, because it takes a few words like funny, down to earth, and no nonsense into Pacific Northwestern professor who loves to watch reruns of The Office and Seinfeld and really believes in science and the power of factual research. That is so much more vivid and so much clearer, because even something like funny can be interpreted in a variety of different ways. There are all sorts of types of sense of humor. And so when you have clarity around exactly what that looks like, then you empower everyone, including yourself, to really be able to embody that more fully, but also to show up in a cohesive, consistent way across all of the different touch points that you have. Everything from attending events to engaging on social media to your website to being face-to-face with people. People are getting a consistent experience across the board, and that is really, really important. So we see with Liquid Death that they have that crystal clarity about who they are. They actually have a merch shop on their website, which I don't remember the exact number, but in 2024, I believe generated more than $3 million just in selling branded merch for a water company. That is, to me, just mind-blowing, because that is people that are wanting to buy essentially different types of walking advertisements for a water company, like we see here in the upper right corner. This is, I think they call it their flasket. So it's a casket-shaped flask, which is extra funny because this is a water company, not alcohol. And so you just see the way that they really understand who they are, and they very boldly lean into that. Their membership club is called the Liquid Death Country Club. Selling your soul to join the club gets you, and I won't read you the whole list, but you see once more how they really understand who they are, and they are unafraid to also perhaps offend or turn some people away. And so this is the other reason why I chose Liquid Death as an example for this presentation, because they are quite extreme in their marketing, but that makes it really easy for you to be able to see these concepts illustrated in a way that may be a little bit more difficult to see when a brand is more subtle or nuanced. But I don't want you to take this presentation and think that what I'm encouraging you to do is to go out there and offend people. I absolutely do not think that you should do that just for the sake of doing it. Instead, it's really about being unafraid and unapologetic in speaking to your customers in the way that they want to be spoken to, and embodying your brand in the way that you feel is best for your long-term business goals. And in their case, they have created this brand that the core identity is all about pushing boundaries and being provocative and making people even a little bit uncomfortable, recognizing that some are going to be disgusted and are going to want to have nothing to do with them, but that ultimately by doing this, they are able to build and strengthen those relationships with their core customers in a way that makes it worth it. So even their newsletter is, they say, want free horoscopes. Sign up for email and text to get your horoscope and other liquid death updates. So they've really also woven this sense of brand identity into every single thing that they're doing, which is the next important piece of this, because you can understand who your competitors are and how you're different. And you can understand who your customers are and how they want to be spoken to. And you can have a strong conviction in who your company identity is. You can understand all of those 3 C's. However, the next step is really figuring out how to weave all of that into everything that you're doing to make your message shine and resonate and speak to your target market. So you have to be bold, especially because if you are selling something like water, your brand might be your only differentiator. Liquid Death is not unique because they are not selling some proprietary type of water. They are just selling spring water. And yes, they have flavors, and yes, some of them are fizzy, and they have interesting collaborations. But at the heart of it, what they are selling is not truly something that is different than other options that are out there on the market. And they are not the only water company to package their water in a can, though they were the first to really make a can that perhaps might trigger people to wonder whether you are drinking alcohol or water. And that was very intentional and a core actually part of the brand story, because it was developed from this idea of, I believe one of the co-founders or investors was a drummer, and he would get so thirsty up on stage and he didn't want to drink alcohol because he needed to be replenishing himself. And so the options were either alcohol, energy drinks, or water bottles. And water bottles were kind of lame and would make him stick out and seem like less of a rocker in the rock and roll world. And so recognizing that there could be a way to have this cool, edgy rocker water that would make drinking water and hydrating something that wasn't seen as lame, but rather something that was cool and was a part of the culture. And so it has that heart and that origin story that helps to fuel all of the things that they're doing. So they're also not just choosing things for the sake of choosing them. They have a very clear perspective, and they understood that there was that gap in the market for how to position and who to sell to in a way that wasn't being done, and now has copycats. You want to be thinking about what makes you different. So going back to that first step 1 of how can you create that contrast, that differentiation between you and your competitors. Knowing who your customers aren't. So some even take this to an extreme of creating brand enemies, which is an idea where you actually have people unifying around a common enemy. And that enemy doesn't have to be a person. In fact, it's really probably better that it isn't. But that enemy can be a concept. Like, for example, Liquid Death also has a component of wanting to minimize plastic bottle waste, because a lot of trash is generated from plastic water bottles, whereas aluminum cans are recyclable and get recycled. And so there is that intentionality even there. And so one of their enemies is plastic water bottles. So that's a way of being able to bring people together around this concept of sustainability, but also strengthening that even further by creating that enemy, if you will. We talked already about the importance of being consistent and cohesive, and you just really need to be constantly asking with every single thing that you're doing, why should people choose you? Why are you the better choice for them? And that should be clear along every single touch point that a customer is having with you and your business. You need to also develop out that unique and distinct voice, and then you can take it to the next level with storytelling, like what Liquid Death has done so well. So even if you are totally offended by Liquid Death and you think it's disgusting, I mean, this isn't a gory, not great image that they have over here that I pulled from their website, but it is such a great case study to see all of this in action. So if you want inspiration, if you want to see how these 3 seeds are really ingrained into the core of everything that a company is doing, then I do strongly encourage you to go check out Liquid Death, take a look at their website, take a look at their commercials and how they show up on social media, and you will see they are distinct, they are unique, they are consistent in their constantly wanting to push people's boundaries. And so when you get those 3 C's together, what you actually create is communication, connection, and conversions. And so those just fuel the growth of your business. These become the engine that you use to really be able to develop your brand and build your business to the next level, to where you are trying to take it. And that developing out that clear brand is where so much of this starts. So you want to infuse the 3 C's into everything that you're doing, into your website, into your emails, social media, even your proposals should have your brand voice clear, everything from colors and how you design it to the kinds of language that you use, the call outs that you might have, the way that you speak to your customers, how you even manage your customer service processes. Because if you really truly understand your customers, then you know that maybe your customers, they really want to feel special. They want to feel like they are being taken care of. And so they don't mind waiting a little bit longer if it means that they're really going to feel like you are caring for their needs and putting them front and center. Whereas other customers, they really might prioritize speed above all else. And so they don't necessarily need as much hand-holding. They just want to know that you received their text, email, chat, what have you, and that they're going to be able to hear back from you soon and that you're going to help resolve the problem ASAP. But the only way that you're going to know how to design those processes is if you understand who those processes are meant to serve. And when you do all of this well, when you are constantly thinking about and refining and building your brand, because that's the other thing, your brand is not static. Your brand is just like a person, where it is going to evolve and adapt and change over time. And so even if you've created your customer avatar 3 years ago and you built out your brand profile and you did all these things, these should all be ideas and parts of your strategy that you are revisiting over and over again, so that you make sure that you understand that you are going in the right direction, that you are speaking to your customers in the way that they want to be spoken to today, tomorrow, and into the future, and that you are constantly also carving out that competitive edge, because that's the other danger is when you do this really well, you are going to have competitors who are going to copy what you're doing. And so you can't rest on a strong reputation. You can't rely on a strong brand name. This is something that you need to continue to obsess over so that you make sure that you maintain that edge and that you are positioned to continue to grow many years into the future. And if you would like more brand building information, I do have a YouTube channel that is Marketing by Emma, and I go in depth in a lot of these different aspects. So, for example, if you really want to know how to build out that customer avatar and that profile, I have videos about that. I have more in depth videos about brand building and copywriting and storytelling. And so, I highly suggest that you check that out and subscribe. And I would also be very appreciative if you would join me over there. And here are my contact details if you have questions, if you would like my help with anything, if there is any way that I can serve you, please do not hesitate to reach out. I would be more than happy to help you or to look into my network and see who I might be able to connect you with. And with that, I would like to say thank you so much for watching and joining. And now I would like to open it up to questions.
Thank you so much, Emma, for such a wonderful presentation. We appreciate the time that you took to put into that. Let's hop right into questions. Our first question is, how can businesses balance staying authentic with the need to adapt to trends or changing customer preferences?
One of the great things is that when you're very clear on who you are and who you're serving, it allows you to be able to identify what trends are going to suit your business. And that's why oftentimes we also see backlash towards companies that maybe jump on a trend that isn't really in alignment with who they are serving. And so as a result, it gives people a bad taste, and then that's where controversy happens. And so I was looking at some of the conversation in the chat, and I saw that some people were wondering how to really connect this to a consulting business and something that is very much based in personal relationships. And I would like to note a couple of things, which is sometimes that can actually make all of this work even harder because we're needing to investigate ourselves and our personal brand as the vehicle that we are using to communicate all of these things. And your brand and how you are showing up in the world, it's there and it's happening regardless of whether you're intentional about it. It is communicated through, if we're talking about personal brand, the clothing that you wear, the kind of vocabulary that you utilize, the ways that you engage with people, how you make them feel, all of those different details are influencing the impression that you leave and the way that somebody perceives you, and then how they're going to associate you in the future. And so that's so important as a first step, but also really being clear about who it is that you serve. Because if you try to just be the designer for anybody and everybody, then it's going to make it difficult for customers to really be able to clarify whether your offering is the best fit for their specific situation versus if they see one of your competitors who is speaking directly to them. Like, let's say that maybe what you really specialize in is working with busy professionals who also have children. They have a lot going on. They really want a bespoke interior that is going to allow them to entertain confidently in their households, but they don't have the time or bandwidth to be involved in every single decision. That kind of person, that kind of profile of a customer is very, very different from somebody who maybe their home is something that they actually want to be very involved in, and they want to be included in every single step of that process. And how you speak to and market to each of those people is going to be very different. So I recognize that using an example like water, it might be difficult to instantly transport that into your own business. But it's actually, I specifically chose this example because it is something that is so ubiquitous and doesn't really have anything unique on the surface. And so it requires that deeper creativity and risk taking if you want to stand out. Whereas if and very similarly, when you are in something that's a service-based business, I am in a service-based business, and I deal with the same things in growing my own brand of there's the terminology and the look and the general marketing best principles that make everybody in an industry look the same. And it is those businesses that are deliberate and really wanting to take a step back and be strategic and get clear on who they are and who their customers are and how they can intentionally stand out. Those are the ones that really make waves and make ripples. And then you're able to use that momentum that you're building to really create something that is lasting and that has that success that you're after.
I really appreciate that elaboration. I think it helps with this because a lot of our members, like you are the brand, you are the company. Personal and company brand can be one and the same. And it's so important to make sure that you're distinguishing that and to be authentic to yourself. With that being said, how our next question is how can smaller or newer brands stand out without having a big marketing budget? So essentially, bang for their buck as far as presenting themselves and getting their brand out there.
Yeah, that's where my personal strategy is very relationship based because when you are able to connect with people who are maybe more influential or more known in the space, then they're able to help lift you up. But they're not going to be able to do that or be interested in doing that if they don't really understand who you are and how to recommend you. Because if you want people to be speaking about you and referring business to you, they have to understand who is going to be a good fit. They can't recommend anybody and everybody. But if you come in and you say, hey, I think that there's a real gap in the market here, and this is something that I do that is serving that gap in a way that we're not seeing anybody else do, then it might actually be solving a problem for that person who in the past has had to maybe recommend a company or a solution that's not ideal, but just the best that they have, or say, I'm not sure, let me get back to you. So I would say networking certainly it cannot be underestimated. And we have social media, which of course is a whole subject in and of itself, but it is slow moving. It is something that can feel very intimidating and overwhelming, but it really can be so incredibly impactful. But again, it gets back to understanding who your customers are, because if your customers are not on TikTok, then you are spinning your gears publishing videos on TikTok, even if they are the best videos ever. So it will help you understand where you should invest your time. And then it will also help you understand who are the people that my customers are already finding or enjoying their content. And then how can you take inspiration from those people in showing up in your own authentic way? So those are the two lowest hanging fruit. Of course, whenever we're talking about not having a lot of resources to invest, the thing that we're going to have to invest more of is time in substitute for not having the financial resources. But you can make a lot of really solid traction, both in hitting the ground and finding those people to be your to vouch for you when nobody really knows who you are or whether you are reputable.
Perfect. I appreciate that insightful answer. Our next question is, can you share tips for aligning your team around a unified brand message and identity? So a lot of our members might have a small team of 2 to 4. How can they align their team when there is that mix of a personal brand and the company brand.
Yeah, that makes all of this work even more important because, first of all, it's really scary and stressful to have other people representing your brand. You can see from this page right here, the logo of my business is my face and my name is in the name of my business. So I have needed to navigate these same things where I am not a one person show. I need other people to really understand what it is that I'm about and what I'm trying to build with my company, and then be able to represent that and show up in a way that they're not mimicking me, but they are upholding the values and treating people and engaging with people in the way that is in alignment with who I am and what business it is that I'm trying to build. And that's where the brand identity portion of this conversation I feel is so valuable. Building out a brand persona that is separate from you but encapsulates a lot of the things that are really critical to understanding how to present and embody your business can really make that much more tangible than just using a list of words. So a lot of times, like when you hear somebody describing a brand, they'll just say a few words, like, we are polished and professional and approachable and kind. And that's helpful, certainly, but it's difficult to take those general words and really understand how that comes together when I'm writing an email, or how that should be presented when I am uh, going and walking the floor of an event. And so having a more complete profile where people can have a more tangible sense of those words in action is really helpful. And then similarly with that customer avatar, with having a really clear understanding of who the customer is, because we all to some degree have a natural ability at being chameleons when we are interacting with other people. So we understand that in different types of settings and different types of relationships, we're going to adapt to those so that we can have the most successful interaction possible. Not from a manipulative place, but just as a basic human social skill. And so understanding who that customer is on a core level, understanding what their needs and problems and desires are, will also allow your team to be able to speak that language. Because if it's a very busy person with young children at home, their concerns and their stresses as they are trying to evaluate whether to hire you or not are not going to be the same as somebody who it has maybe they're a recent empty nester, they're downsizing, and they can finally have the home of their dreams without worrying about children ruining it. And so you're going to engage with them differently, and that all gets back to knowing who the is. So I really cannot stress how important both of those pieces are to really creating more effective marketing and then giving customers that contrast to understand why they should choose you over someone else. Like, I'm sure that contrast is something that you think about all the time as a designer, because that's what really allows something to pop and really creates a more visually appealing and engaging environment. And that same idea of contrast is also so important when we are thinking about positioning ourselves in a market and giving people a really clearly differentiated point of contrast versus everyone else that they might be considering and evaluating.
Thank you for that. And I like what you were saying about it being an immersive brand identity, not it just being a list of words, but like you showed with your examples, how are we using words? How are we not just doing emails, but how are we showing up? How are we talking? I think that's so important. Um, our last question for today is how often should you revisit or reassess your brand strategy? I know you talked about it on this slide here, but you said often. Is that something that on a quarterly basis, or is it just more um, seeing the clients that you're pulling in and then reassessing after each one?
So I would say some of it is going to be externally motivated and some of it is going to be internally motivated. So I don't think that quarterly is realistic for every business because if you're a small business, if you have minimal team, this is something that's more involved and it can be, difficult to actually carve out the time just for managing all of the tasks that you already have. So I would say probably annually or semi-annually is a solid start. But I would also say the other time to do this is if you're feeling some shifting happening in your ecosystem, whether that's maybe a new competitor that's coming in and creating some buzz, or somebody's going out of business, or there's something significant that's happening in your space, then that is a really good point to be looking back at these documents and incorporating them into your strategy. And I would just say to treat them as living documents. So they're to not just treat them as, okay, I've done this once, I'm done with it, but to just be engaging with them also as a tool to use as you strategize your next quarter's marketing plan, or you're preparing for an upcoming event that you're going to be presenting at or having a booth at, and using this as a way to orient your efforts.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Emma, for sharing this presentation with us. Before we end for today, I want to give you the floor to share any final thoughts with our audience.
I feel like I've already driven home the main points that I was wanting to. So I would just like to thank all of you for attending, for participating, for your questions, and I wish you all the very as much success as you hope for yourselves.
Fabulous. Thank you again, Emma, and a huge thank you to our wonderful audience as always. Until next time, I hope everyone has a great day. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.